The starship Odyssey glided silently through the black sea of space. Its silver hull reflected faint light from distant stars, making it look almost like a moving star itself. Inside, the ship was alive with activity. Humans and their alien allies worked together, each focused on their roles in the mission of exploration. The Odyssey was not just a vessel of steel and circuits. It was a symbol of cooperation between species that had once known little of each other. Among the crew was Daniel Carter, a young human officer in his mid-20s. He was still learning the ways of life in deep space, adjusting to cultures far different from his own. Daniel was bright and eager, but he often found himself struggling with the customs of their alien companions. Today would be one of those days he would never forget. Daniel had been assigned to assist in the research bay, where the Aurelians worked. The Aurelians were tall, graceful beings, their skin glowing faintly with patterns of soft light. Each pattern pulsed like a quiet rhythm, as if their very bodies carried the energy of stars. Humans often described them as beautiful, though beauty felt like a small word to capture their presence. They moved with a flow that seemed almost like water, every step smooth and perfect. Daniel was nervous. It was the first time he had to work directly with Lieutenant Seraphine, one of the Aurelians who had joined the Odyssey. She was respected among both her own people and the human crew. Her voice was calm, and her eyes, deep silver with sparks of light, seemed to notice details no one else could see. To Daniel, she was intimidating, but also fascinating. The research bay was quiet, except for the hum of machines. Blue holograms floated in the air, showing star maps and streams of data. Daniel stood beside Seraphine, trying to focus on the readings. She pointed at one of the holographic charts. "These lines," she said in her soft, melodic voice, "show the energy flow around the nebula we are approaching. Do you see how it bends?" Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the glowing curves. "Yes, I think so." He was not entirely sure, but he didn't want to look foolish. Seraphine turned slightly toward him, her glowing patterns shifting as she moved. Daniel froze for a moment. He had seen Aurelians before, but being this close. The glow of her skin seemed almost alive, as though telling a story written in light. He tried to look back at the hologram, but his eyes betrayed him, tracing the lines of her form, and then it happened. Without meaning to, Daniel whispered under his breath. The words slipped out before his brain could stop them. "She's incredible." The sound was barely louder than a breath. On Earth, no one would have noticed. But Aurelians had sharper hearing than humans, and the room fell silent. The nearby human technicians looked up, shocked. One of them even dropped a stylus. Daniel's heart raced. He realized immediately what he had done. Among the Aurelians, speaking aloud about their physical form was something no human dared to do. Their culture held the body as sacred, a vessel of energy and history. Observations about it were never spoken carelessly, and Daniel, without realizing, had broken that rule. His face turned red. His hands trembled as he tried to think of words to cover his mistake. I didn't. Stay the silence stretched. Daniel could almost hear the pounding of his own heart. He expected anger. He expected Seraphine to turn away from him in disgust, or perhaps report him for disrespect. Every eye in the room was on him, but then something unexpected happened. Seraphine tilted her head slightly, the glowing lines across her skin shifting in gentle waves. Her expression was not anger, not even disapproval. Instead, she looked. "Curious, you see me?" she said softly. Daniel blinked. What? "You see the patterns," Seraphine continued, her silver eyes fixed on him. "Most humans notice only the light, the glow. But your words, they speak of the shape beneath the rhythm. Few outside my people recognize it." The room was still. The other humans exchanged bewildered glances. None of them had ever heard an Aurelian respond this way. Daniel tried to recover. "I didn't mean any offense. It just slipped out. I wasn't thinking." Seraphine's voice remained calm, almost warm. Honesty that escapes the mind before it is shaped by fear is sometimes the truest kind of thought. Do not fear it. Daniel could not believe what he was hearing. Was she complimenting him? One of the human technicians whispered to another, "Did she just Approve of that? The Aurelians were known for their formality, for keeping a distance from humans when it came to matters of perception and culture. Yet here was Seraphine, not offended but intrigued. She stepped closer to the hologram and gestured for Daniel to look again. Tell me, Daniel Carter, when you see the glow of these lines, how do they appear to you? Do they shift? Do they move with a kind of rhythm? Daniel hesitated. He was still embarrassed, but something about her tone gave him courage. Yes, he said slowly. They flow, like rivers bending through valleys. Not straight, but alive. Almost like the patterns on your... He stopped himself before saying too much again. Seraphine's eyes brightened slightly, the silver sparks flickering. Interesting. Most humans describe them as static shapes. You sense the movement. That is closer to truth. The other Aurelians in the bay glanced at each other. It was rare for one of their kind to acknowledge human perception in such a way. For them, perception of flow and rhythm was a mark of deep cultural understanding, something even many aliens struggled to grasp. Daniel stood frozen, not sure if he had just escaped disaster or walked into something greater than he could imagine. Seraphine gave the faintest smile, barely noticeable, but enough to ease the tension in the room. Do not be ashamed, Daniel Carter. Sometimes a thought spoken aloud reveals more than silence ever could. Daniel nodded quickly, though his heart was still racing. His slip of the tongue had not ended in humiliation, but in a moment that felt almost historic. As the others returned to their work, still whispering in disbelief, Daniel realized something had shifted. The line between human and Aurelian understanding had moved, if only slightly. And it had happened because of one careless, honest whisper. For the rest of the shift, Daniel worked in silence, but inside his mind raced with questions. Why had Seraphine reacted this way? What did she mean about seeing patterns? Did his perception of her body somehow reveal something about the universe itself? He didn't know yet, but one thing was clear. His life aboard the Odyssey would never be the same again. The research bay remained quiet long after Daniel's slip of the tongue. Machines hummed, lights flickered, and holograms hovered in the air. But the crew's attention was fixed on what had just taken place. Daniel stood stiffly, still unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. Seraphine had not scolded him. She had not turned away or reported him for disrespect. Instead, she had answered with words that no one expected. You see me? Those words replayed in Daniel's mind again and again. What did she mean by that? Did she think he had some special vision? He was just a human officer, fresh out of training. He had no special gifts, but Seraphine continued her work as if nothing unusual had happened. Her glowing patterns pulsed calmly as she adjusted the hologram controls. Expanding the map of the nebula the Odyssey was heading toward. Yet every now and then, she glanced at Daniel with an expression that seemed to hold more than curiosity. The human technicians nearby whispered among themselves. Did you hear her? One murmured. She didn't even get angry. It's impossible, another said quietly. Aurelians never respond like that. He broke their rule, and she praised him? Daniel's ears burned. He wanted to sink into the floor. He forced himself to focus on the glowing star charts. But his mind refused to settle. At last, Seraphine spoke again, her voice calm but carrying weight. Daniel Carter, tell me what you see when you look at this flow. She pointed at the curling streams of light that represented energy currents near the nebula. Daniel hesitated. He was afraid to say the wrong thing again. But Seraphine waited patiently, her silver eyes steady. He swallowed hard and said, It looks alive, like the patterns are moving with each other. They're not just lines. They're like threads weaving into a fabric. A faint shimmer crossed Seraphine's glowing patterns, almost like a hidden smile. Yes, that is how we see it. Most species see only stillness, fixed images. But you sense movement, connection. That is rare. The room grew even quieter. The Aurelians nearby exchanged surprised glances. One of them, taller than Seraphine and wearing the rank of scientist, stepped forward. His voice was deeper, his glow more intense. Lieutenant Seraphini, are you suggesting this human has perception beyond his kind? Seraphine turned to him, her tone firm. I am saying he sees what others ignore. That alone is valuable. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to protest. He wasn't special. He wasn't trained in alien sciences. He had only spoken without thinking. Yet Seraphine's words carried weight. The Aurelians respected her. And now everyone was staring at him as if he were different. I didn't mean anything, Daniel blurted out nervously. I just noticed things. I wasn't trying to. Seraphine raised a hand gently. There is no need to explain. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones we speak without trying. The human technicians shifted uneasily. They had worked with Aurelians before, but none had ever heard them speak with such openness toward a human. Usually Aurelians kept their insights private, sharing only with their own kind. But here, in front of everyone, Seraphine was giving weight to Daniel's words. The senior scientist frowned. If what you say is true, Lieutenant, then this human perception could be useful. But it must be tested. Seraphine inclined her head. Yes, it must. Daniel felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. Tested for what? He was only supposed to help with data, not become some kind of experiment. The senior scientist turned and left the bay, clearly planning something. The tensions slowly faded, and the humans returned to their work, though their whispers did not stop. Daniel could hear fragments. Lucky break. Strange reaction. What did he even see? When the others were busy again, Seraphine leaned slightly toward Daniel. Her voice was quiet, almost secretive. Do not fear this moment. You revealed something hidden. That is why I answered as I did. Daniel looked at her uncertainly, but I embarrassed myself. I spoke without thinking. That is why it mattered, Seraphine replied. Honesty, unshaped by caution, is rare. In my people's tradition, such words are not mistakes. They are windows. Daniel didn't know how to respond. His chest still felt tight, but a part of him wondered if she truly believed what she said. For the rest of the shift, he tried to stay focused on his tasks, but he kept catching glimpses of Seraphine studying him from the corner of her eye, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. Later that day, during the evening meal, word had already spread across the ship. Daniel felt it the moment he walked into the mess hall. Conversations quieted and eyes turned toward him. Humans and aliens alike whispered about the incident in the research bay. He sat down quickly with his tray of food, wishing he could disappear. His friend, Ensign Kelly, slid into the seat across from him. She leaned in with a grin. So, she said in a low voice, you're famous now? Don't start. Kelly laughed. I'm serious. Half the ship is talking about you. They say you impressed an Aurelian with one sentence. Do you know how impossible that is? I didn't impress anyone, Daniel muttered. I just said something stupid. Not to her, Kelly replied. Her tone softened. Daniel, you don't realize what this means. The Aurelians see us as children, always learning, never knowing. But today, one of their own admitted, we might notice something they respect. That's big. Daniel shook his head. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to do my job. Kelly smiled knowingly. Too late for that. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in his small cabin, staring at the ceiling while the ship's engines thrummed softly through the walls. Seraphine's words echoed in his mind. You see me? You sense movement. That is rare. Why him? Why now? He didn't want to stand out, but a small part of him, deep inside, felt a spark of pride. Maybe humans could notice things others missed. Maybe their way of seeing the universe wasn't so small after all. The next morning, Daniel was summoned to the observation deck. When he arrived, he found the captain, several Aurelians, and Seraphine waiting for him. The large windows showed the distant glow of the nebula, swirling faintly in the dark. The captain spoke first. Mr. Carter, it seems your words yesterday have gained attention. The Aurelians believe you may have a unique perspective. They want you to assist in our next mission, navigating through this nebula. Daniel's mouth went dry. Me. But I don't know how to. Seraphine stepped forward, her glowing patterns calm and steady. You will not be alone. I will guide you. but your vision may show us paths we cannot see alone. The other Aurelians nodded in agreement, though some still looked doubtful. Daniel's pulse raced. This was no longer about embarrassment or whispers. This was real. Somehow, his careless words had placed him at the center of a mission that could decide the safety of the entire crew. He stared out at the swirling light of the nebula. It seemed vast, mysterious, and dangerous. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that he could do this. Seraphine's gaze met his, steady and unshaken. "Daniel Carter," she said, "yesterday you revealed a truth. Now, let us see how far that truth can carry us." The nebula filled the starship's main view screen, stretching like a living ocean of color and light. Clouds of crimson and gold swirled together, folding into shadows that seemed to move on their own. Streams of energy arced like lightning across the vast distance. Silent yet powerful enough to tear apart an unprepared ship, the crew of the Odyssey gathered on the bridge, silent and tense. Missions into nebulae were always dangerous, but this one was different. The Aurelians had warned that this nebula was unstable, its energy shifting unpredictably. Even their most advanced sensors struggled to read its patterns. Navigation through it had claimed ships before, and now, to Daniel's disbelief, the captain had chosen him to help guide the way. He stood near the front of the bridge, stiff and nervous, while Captain Reyes addressed the crew. "We must pass through this nebula to reach our destination. The Aurelians tell us that conventional instruments will not be enough. Lieutenant Seraphine has proposed an alternative approach, one that may allow us safe passage." The captain paused, his eyes resting on Daniel. "Ensign Carter will assist in navigation," whispers spread quickly across the bridge. Some voices carried doubt, others disbelief. Daniel could feel every eye on him. His palms were sweaty, and his heart pounded as though trying to escape his chest. He had never asked for this. He was a junior officer, not a navigator, not a scientist. Seraphine stepped forward. Her tall form glowed faintly in the dim light, her silver eyes calm as ever. "Ensign Carter's perception is uncommon. He sees patterns of flow where others see only chaos. With guidance, he can help us chart a path that no machine alone can find." One of the senior officers, Commander Harlan, frowned. "With respect, Lieutenant, entrusting the safety of the Odyssey to the instincts of a young ensign seems reckless." Seraphine's glowing patterns rippled, a sign of controlled patience. "It is not instinct. It is perception. A truth we have already witnessed." She glanced at Daniel. "The nebula shifts with rhythm. He can feel that rhythm." Captain Reyes raised a hand to silence further objections. "Enough. This mission requires risks, and I trust Lieutenant Seraphine's judgment. Ensign Carter will assist. Prepare for entry." Daniel swallowed hard. His voice caught in his throat, but he forced out the words, "Aye, Captain." The guidance chamber was dimly lit, its walls lined with holographic projectors. In the center stood a circular platform where charts of the nebula glowed in shifting colors. Seraphine and Daniel stepped onto the platform, their figures surrounded by the dancing light of energy flows. "This is where we will see beyond the sensors," Seraphine explained. Her voice was calm, but Daniel sensed a quiet intensity beneath it. "The machines show only fragments, but together we will piece them into something real." Daniel nodded, though his throat was dry. He tried to focus on the patterns, but the lines shifted so quickly they seemed impossible to follow. Seraphine placed her hand lightly on the console, and the lights adjusted. "Close your eyes, Daniel," she said gently. He blinked. "What?" "Close your eyes," she repeated. "Do not look with them. Look with your mind. What do you feel when you think of the nebula?" Daniel hesitated, but obeyed. Slowly, he let his eyelids shut. The hum of the ship surrounded him, steady but distant. He thought of the nebula, the way it had looked on the screen, chaotic, dangerous, yet strangely alive. He focused on that feeling at first. There was nothing. Just darkness. Then, slowly, he began to sense something else. A faint pull, as though invisible threads stretched across the void. The flows did not seem random anymore. They moved like rivers, splitting and rejoining, sometimes calm, sometimes storming, He opened his mouth without thinking. It's weaving. The streams twist, but they come back together, like a pattern repeating itself. Seraphine's voice came softly. Yes, that is it. Now, where is the calm? Where does the storm break? Daniel's brow furrowed as he concentrated. His hand lifted unconsciously, pointing toward one of the glowing streams. There, if we move along that curve, it bends away from the storms. Seraphine touched the console, locking in the path he indicated. She studied it, then nodded. Correct. That flow will remain stable for several hours. Aurelians in the chamber murmured in surprise. Daniel's guess, or rather, his perception matched their own hidden readings. Ones not yet shared with the human crew. Daniel opened his eyes and saw Seraphine watching him with approval. You can see it, she said simply. I don't understand how, Daniel admitted. You do not need to understand, Seraphine replied. You only need to trust it. Back on the bridge, the captain gave the order. Helm, adjust course to match the path provided. The ship turned slowly, aligning with the flow Daniel had indicated. The moment the Odyssey entered the nebula, the entire vessel shuddered. Colors and light swallowed the view screens, filling them with violent storms of plasma and dust. Energy crackled around the hull, rattling every panel. The crew held their breath. The ship pressed forward. Then, gradually, the shaking lessened. The Odyssey settled into a calmer stream, gliding as though carried by a hidden current. Gas and plasma shifted around them, but the ship held steady. Stability achieved, reported the helmsman, relief clear in his voice. A cheer went up on the bridge. Daniel sagged with relief. For the first time, he felt the weight of what he had done. His words, his strange perception, had kept the ship safe. But the journey was not over. Hours passed. The nebula shifted constantly, streams collapsing and storms forming without warning. Several times Seraphine called on Daniel again. Each time he closed his eyes and focused, describing where the flows bent and where the calm returned. Each time Seraphine confirmed his perception, and the Odyssey adjusted course. But then, near the heart of the nebula, alarms blared. A massive storm was forming ahead, far larger than anything before. Plasma waves rolled like titans across the void, tearing at space itself. Captain, sensors show no safe path, shouted the navigator. Panic rippled through the crew. The Odyssey was trapped, caught between collapsing streams. One wrong move would mean destruction. Seraphine turned to Daniel, her eyes steady but urgent. Daniel, focus. What do you feel? He closed his eyes quickly. At first, all he felt was chaos, a storm crashing against every thought. But he forced himself deeper, searching for the rhythm beneath the chaos. Slowly, he sensed it the faintest thread, weaving through the storm like a narrow tunnel. There. He pointed sharply, his voice rising. It's thin, but it's there. A path cutting through the middle. If we move fast, we can ride it before it closes. The navigator shook his head. Captain, there's nothing there. Our sensors show only collapse. Captain Reyes hesitated, then looked at Seraphine. Her silver eyes met Daniel's, then the captain's. He is right. Trust him. The captain gave the order. Helm, take the path. The ship lunged forward. The storm roared around them, plasma waves crashing dangerously close. The hull groaned under the strain. Sparks flew from panels. Crew members gripped their stations. Teeth clenched, and then silence. The Odyssey burst through the storm, gliding into a wide, calm pocket of space within the nebula. The pressure eased, the alarms quieted. The crew exhaled as one, relief flooding the air. Captain Reyes turned to Daniel, his stern face softening. Good work, Ensign. You just saved this ship. Daniel could hardly believe it. His knees felt weak, but pride swelled inside him. Seraphine's glowing patterns shimmered in quiet approval. I told you, she said softly. You can see what others cannot. As the ship continued through the nebula's calm pocket, Daniel finally understood. His accidental words in the research bay had led to this moment. He had been tested, and he had succeeded. but deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. Something about humanity, something even they did not yet understand, had been revealed, and the galaxy was about to take notice. The Odyssey floated in a rare pocket of calm within the raging nebula. Outside the thick viewports, colors swirled in silence, crimson rivers flowing into golden storms, shadows breaking apart into bright sparks of energy. It was beautiful but terrifying. The crew worked quickly, running scans and making sure the engines had survived the strain of the storm they had just escaped. For now, the ship was safe, and much of that safety had come from one unlikely source, Ensign Daniel Carter. The bridge buzzed with low conversation. Officers whispered about how Daniel had found the invisible path through chaos. A few still doubted him, but none could deny what had happened. Even the skeptical Commander Harlan kept his words to himself, his usual sharp tone muted in the presence of results. Daniel sat at his station, exhausted but restless. He kept replaying the moments in his mind, closing his eyes, feeling the flow, pointing to the path no one else could see. He hadn't understood it himself. He hadn't planned it. Yet it had worked. Seraphine stood nearby, her tall form calm, her glowing pattern steady as a heartbeat. She had not looked surprised when Daniel guided the ship. She had looked expectant, almost as if she had known it would happen. That thought stayed with Daniel. She had believed in him before even he believed in himself. Why? When the bridge quieted, Captain Reyes gave a simple order. We will remain in this calm pocket for the next cycle. Use the time to repair, refuel, and prepare for what lies ahead. He looked at Daniel briefly, his expression unreadable. Mr. Carter, report to the observation chamber with Lieutenant Seraphine. She has requested a private discussion. Daniel's heart skipped. Requested? About him? He stood quickly, trying not to show his nerves, and followed Seraphine through the silent corridors of the ship. The observation chamber was one of the most peaceful places on the Odyssey. A dome of transparent alloy stretched above, giving a wide view of space. From here, the nebula looked endless, a canvas of moving colors. Daniel and Seraphine stood in the center of the chamber. For a long moment, neither spoke. Daniel's eyes were drawn upward, watching the glowing streams of energy bend and twist outside. At last, Seraphine broke the silence. You wonder why I trusted you? Daniel turned, startled. Yes, I don't understand any of this. I just said something foolish in the research bay, and suddenly I'm seeing things others can't. Why? Seraphine's silver eyes held his without wavering. Because it is who you are. It is who your people are. Daniel frowned. My people? Humans? We're not like Aurelians. We don't see the universe in glowing patterns. A faint ripple crossed the lights on Seraphine's skin. You are wrong, Daniel. Humans do not see as we do. You see differently. But different does not mean less. Sometimes different means more. Daniel shook his head. I don't follow. Seraphine stepped closer, her glowing form bathed in the nebulous colors. For centuries, my people believed we alone could sense the flow of energy in the universe. We thought it was our gift, our burden. But then we met humans. At first we dismissed you short-lived, restless, distracted by details. Yet over time, we began to notice something. You see not what is, but what could be. Where we see fixed patterns, you see possibility. Daniel's breath caught. Possibility? Yes, Seraphine said softly. You did not simply see the flow in the nebula. You felt where it might bend, where it could open. That is why you found the path our sensors could not detect. You were not seeing the present, you were sensing the future it could become. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. I'm just human. I don't have special vision. You have something greater, Seraphine replied. Your kind is unshackled by certainty. You imagine? You believe in what does not yet exist. That is why you spoke of my form and called it incredible, not because of the glow or the shape, but because you sensed the harmony within it. You saw beyond what was there. Daniel's face grew warm at the memory of his embarrassing words. But now, hearing them reframed, he began to understand. His accidental whisper had not been about beauty, it had been about recognition. Recognition of a rhythm he hadn't even realized he noticed. "Are you saying," he asked slowly, "that humans can see things even you Aurelians can't?" Seraphine inclined her head. "Yes, not with eyes. Not with sensors. But with the strange and powerful vision of imagination. It is a strength your kind has always carried, though you rarely realize it. Most species, including mine, are trapped in what is. Humans live in what might be." Daniel felt the words sink deep. It sounded too grand, too heavy for someone like him. Yet the truth of the mission echoed in his mind. He had guided the ship through a storm even Aurelians feared, and he had done it by believing in a path that wasn't there until it was. For a while, neither of them spoke. They stood together, watching the nebula twist and glow outside. Daniel finally found his voice. "Why tell me this? Why not keep it secret?" Seraphine's patterns dimmed slightly, as if weighed by the thought. "Because it has been secret too long. My people feared what it meant. If humans could share our gift tour, even surpass it, what place would that leave for us? Many Aurelians still do not wish to admit it. But I see the truth. The galaxy must see it too." Daniel felt the air grow heavy. He understood now why she had been so calm when he made his mistake. She hadn't seen a foolish boy. She had seen proof of something her people had hidden for generations. "So," Daniel said quietly, "my accident in the research bay, it wasn't really an accident to you." Her silver eyes softened. "No, it was the unveiling of truth. In my culture, we believe that sometimes the universe speaks through the unguarded tongue. That day, it spoke through you." Daniel let out a long breath. He was no longer embarrassed. He was overwhelmed as they left the observation chamber. Daniel realized the weight on his shoulders had grown. This was not just about one ship or one mission. It was about humanity itself. If what Seraphine said was true, then humans were not the lesser allies many aliens believed them to be. They had a strength even the Aurelians respected, perhaps even feared. The corridors felt different now. Crew members still glanced at him with curiosity, but Daniel walked with new awareness. His words and actions could no longer be small. That night he returned to his cabin, but sleep refused to come. He sat by the small window, watching the nebula's shifting light. His mind swirled with Seraphine's words, "You see not what is, but what could be." He thought about Earth, about the human drive to build, to imagine, to dream of futures far beyond reach. They had reached the stars not because they had the strongest ships or the longest lifespans, but because they dared to try. Because they looked at the impossible and whispered, "Maybe." Perhaps that was humanity's true gift, and perhaps it was time the galaxy learned it. The next day, Captain Reyes called a meeting in the briefing hall. Humans and Aurelians filled the room, waiting for the captain's words. Daniel sat near the front, beside Seraphine. The captain's voice carried firm authority. "We survived because of cooperation. Because Lieutenant Seraphine trusted an ensign, and because Ensign Carter saw what no machine could. This lesson must not be ignored. Humanity has proven once again that our value lies not only in strength, but in perspective." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes turned toward him. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. But Seraphine placed a hand lightly on the table, her glowing patterns calm, and he felt steadier. For the first time, Daniel did not feel like a nervous junior officer. He felt like a bridge between worlds. As the meeting ended, Seraphine leaned close and whispered, "The galaxy will remember this. You must be ready." Daniel nodded slowly, the truth settling deep in his chest. He had spoken one careless thought, and it had changed everything. The hidden truth was no longer hidden. The Odyssey continued its journey through the nebula, guided now by more than charts and scanners. The crew carried with them a new awareness, a quiet weight that made every action feel sharper. Something had shifted between humans and Aurelians, between Daniel and Seraphine, and perhaps even between humanity and the galaxy itself. Daniel Carter. Still, the same young ensign now found his days filled with new responsibility. Where once he had been overlooked, now officers sought his perspective. They asked for his input during tactical reviews, even if he offered nothing more than instinct. Engineers checked their systems twice if Daniel suggested a different angle. He did not fully understand why they trusted him so quickly, but he felt the change. Seraphine remained close. She continued to guide him, not with commands, but with quiet counsel. Her calm presence balanced his restless thoughts, and her belief in him gave him strength he didn't know he carried. But the peace did not last long. One evening, alarms echoed through the ship. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and the intercom carried the captain's urgent voice. Unidentified vessels emerging from the storm. All crew to stations. This is not a drill. Daniel rushed to the bridge with the others. Through the main viewport, dark shapes emerged from the shifting nebula. Jagged, angular, and bristling with weapons. They moved like predators. Pirates. Commander Harlan muttered, his tone grim. Scavengers. They hunt stranded ships in this sector. The captain stood firm. Shields up. Prepare evasive maneuvers. But the nebula made combat risky. The energy storms would twist sensors, scramble targeting, and punish any misstep. It was the worst place to face an enemy, and the pirates knew it. Daniel felt the tension spread across the bridge. Officers whispered, some openly afraid. The Odyssey was strong, but it was not a warship. The captain looked at Seraphine. Options. She studied the patterns of energy outside, her glowing lines pulsing slowly. The nebula hides many paths, but they are unstable. A single error would destroy us. Daniel's hands tightened on his console. He felt the storm pulling at him again, the same way it had during the escape. His chest burned with nervous energy. And then, like before, he saw it. Not clearly, not as a path drawn before him, but as a possibility. A direction that bent toward survival. His voice came out before he could think. There's a way through. Turn 40 degrees starboard and hold for 12 seconds. Then dive. All eyes snapped toward him. Commander Harlan frowned. That's suicide. Our charts show nothing there. Daniel swallowed. I know, but I can feel it. The storm will open there. It's the only chance. The captain studied him for a long moment. Silence filled the bridge. Then, slowly, Captain Rhea said, Helm, follow his instructions. The ship turned sharply. The pirates fired, but their shots missed, thrown off by the nebula's distortion. Energy waves closed in like walls of fire, but just before they collapsed, a gap appeared narrow, visible to sensors, but real. The Odyssey slid through. The crew gasped in disbelief. The pirates, unable to follow with the same precision, were swallowed by the storm. Their signals vanished into static. For the second time, Daniel Carter had saved the ship. Afterward, the crew cheered him. Even Commander Harlan clapped him on the shoulder, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know how you do it, kid, but keep doing it. Daniel smiled faintly, but inside, he felt heavy. It wasn't luck. It wasn't guesswork. It was what Seraphine had told him, human vision, not of what is, but what could be. Later that night, Seraphine found him again in the observation chamber. She stood beside him, her patterns glowing softly in the starlight. You understand now? She said. Daniel nodded slowly. I think I do, but it's still overwhelming. Why me? Why now? Because truth always finds its moment, Seraphine replied. For too long, humanity's strength was hidden in plain sight. Others saw you as reckless, impatient, chaotic. But now, they must see the truth that your chaos is creation, that your uncertainty is possibility. Daniel looked out at the nebula. So what happens now? Do I just tell everyone? Announce it. She shook her head. Not yet. The galaxy is not ready. But soon, very soon, events will force the truth into the open. When that happens, voices like yours will carry it farther than mine ever could. Daniel's heart pounded. He had never imagined himself a leader of anything. Yet the path ahead seemed clear, as if the storm itself had revealed it days later. The Odyssey reached the edge of the nebula. The crew rejoiced at the sight of open space. But waiting for them at the border was not silence, but a fleet ships of many species gathered in uneasy alliance. The captain ordered the crew to stand by. Messages filled the airwaves. The Council of Allied Worlds had sent observers. Responding to reports of strange activity within the nebula, Daniel watched nervously as Aurelians, Cathari, and even the cold-eyed Draelans transmitted questions. What had happened inside? How had the Odyssey survived where so many others vanished? It was then that Seraphine stepped forward. She looked at Daniel, her silver eyes steady, and spoke to the council across the waves. We survived because of truth. A truth long hidden. Humanity is not weak, nor blind, nor lesser than others believe. Humanity carries a gift unlike any other species, a vision of what does not yet exist. A vision that can guide us through storms no sensor can read. Gasps and protests erupted across the channels. Some voices denied it, others demanded proof. Seraphine turned, gesturing to Daniel. You want proof? Ask him. Daniel froze. Hundreds of eyes across dozens of worlds were now focused on him. His throat went dry. He wanted to shrink, to disappear. But then he remembered the storm, the pirates, the path no one else could see. He remembered Seraphine's words, "You must be ready." He took a breath. I didn't plan this. I didn't want it. But it's real. I don't see patterns the way Aurelians do. I don't calculate like machines. I just believe in what could be. I see doors where others see walls. And I think that's what humans are. That's our gift. We imagine. Council fell silent. Daniel's voice grew stronger. That's why we built ships when we had no wings. That's why we reached stars when we had no map. And that's why we'll keep going. Even when the galaxy tells us we can't. Because someone will always look at the impossible and whisper. Maybe. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, one of the Aurelians spoke. Perhaps the boy is right, others murmured. The debate began, fierce and uncertain. But the seed had been planted. When the meeting ended, Seraphine stood beside Daniel in the quiet of the observation deck once more. The nebula glowed behind them, vast and eternal. You spoke well, she said. Daniel shook his head. I just spoke the truth. She tilted her head, her patterns glowing like a smile, and that is all the universe ever needed. For the first time, Daniel felt at peace with the strange accident that had begun everything. His foolish words, spoken without thought, had opened a path wider than any nebula. A path not just for him, but for all humanity. The reply from the galaxy was not yet complete. Some doubted. Some feared. But others listened. And in that listening, change had begun. Daniel looked at Seraphine, then out at the endless stars. His voice was quiet, but steady. This is only the beginning. And somewhere deep in the storm of possibility, the universe seemed to whisper back.